Well, hello everybody. We're flying along here in a DJI Mavic Air 2 at the Great Salt Lake, the southern end of it, in an area that was home to the Saltair amusement park, which was originally built around about 1893 and was kind of the Coney Island of the West. Very large, very popular, but it burned down several times, was rebuilt several times, and more recently, I think about the 1970s, they built a small facility a little bit further west. Nothing like the grandeur of the original Saltair facility, but the building of the old Saltair was on these pilings, thousands of them. And you'll see through as we fly along here various some of the pilings that still remain, and some of the other structures that were involved in the facility. So it's really kind of an interesting place, and unfortunately, it is no more. Pretty cool. We have this kind of fanned out area as kind of like a river delta. You can just barely make out, almost into center, some of the pilings, and you'll see that a little closer in a minute. As I said, it was a pretty large facility. I think just kind of on the scale of what you see back east. You see the flock of birds kind of flying along, approaching the center and then going kind of below me. You'll notice they really weren't noticing or upset by the drone at all, and I'm only maybe 100 feet above the ground at this point. So this was approaching this kind of bricked item. I'm not real sure what it was, a piling or something, but that's typical of the kind of remains that are left. And that's the Kennecott smelter stack in the background, which is the tallest freestanding structure west of the Mississippi. All right, so we've moved on. This was the second flight on the Mavic Air 2. So we moved on to the Tintic Standard Reduction Mill near Goshen, Utah, so about 60 miles south, 65 miles south of where we just were. And this reduction mill was part of the mining operations in the area. And what it really did was it didn't produce final metal. What it really did was take the ore and concentrate it, reduce the quantity so that the shipping costs for final processing would be a lot less. Back in this time period, which was the early 1900s, the railroads were the only game in town, and they charged for it. So reduction mills like this were basically built to reduce the amount of material that had to be shipped to reduce the cost, because transportation was very expensive back then. So this mine, again, the Tintic Standard Reduction Mill, this mine processing facility, processed ores that contained copper and gold and silver and lead. But they used a kind of an old processing technology that was almost outdated as soon as they built it. So it was really only in operation from, I think, 1921 to about 1925. And when it was in operation, this whole area here was covered under a roof. And it was gravity fed, so the ore would have been brought in at the top, and the process would have seen everything move downhill. As you can see, graffiti artists have been pretty busy here, and when I first moved to Utah back in 2006, this had some graffiti on it, but nowhere near what we see now. So most of the graffiti you see has occurred over the last, 10 years. But this is now kind of very controlled property, so trespassing is ill-advised. They claim the reason for that is contamination of water from the mining operations, so heavy metals and other things that were toxic. The bizarre aspect about that, though, is the runoff from the streams that run by here go right past a pasture where cattle feed and drink. So something just doesn't add up as far as that's concerned. So this was late in the afternoon, maybe an hour or so before sunset. So we got some fairly strong light being shown directly on it. The sun is almost directly at my back here. I just love these kind of abandoned industrial mining facilities, even with the graffiti. There's something about it that it appeals to me. And to avoid trespassing, where I was standing with the remote was just off of the property area, so I didn't actually trespass, technically. Back when this was being pretty frequently visited, before they got really strict with trespassing, you would get groups of 8 or 10 or even more people, often dressing up and playing, like making their own little home movies kind of thing, which I think is pretty cool. And it's a little upsetting to me that they've gotten a little anal about trespassing here. What's the big deal? I have my doubts about the validity of the contamination, again, given the fact that nearby ranchers' cattle are drinking from the water that they say is polluted. So who's allowing us to eat the meat from those ranchers? Inquiring minds want to know. So coming towards the end of this segment, and then we're going to return back to the Great Salt Lake in the Saltair area in just a moment. All right, back at the Saltair area, Great Salt Lake. And this was a different day, and the third day actually of flying the Mavic Air 2. And I had kind of missed this rusting old vehicle from the first flights. I mean, I could see it in the background, but with the small screen, cell phone, I really didn't notice this vehicle in the video. So I went back after looking at Google Earth and decided I wanted to visit these vehicles. So this particular day was Wednesday of last week, the 10th or whatever it is, and it was quite warm, and Utah generally isn't too bad for bugs, being the desert and all, but this is the Great Salt Lake, so you got a body of water, and the mosquitoes and other biting insects were just unbelievable. I'm itching thinking about it. So this was the first vehicle, which is mostly above the sand, and this second vehicle is mostly below the sand. So this is closer to where the water level is, and at different times when the water level is higher, this would have been actually submerged. So I'm not sure what kind of vehicle this was. I'm suspecting something like a dump truck. And why somebody would drive that out here onto the sand, I don't know. But let's just say that it was the last thing they did with this vehicle, because it went no further. Alright, so we're getting close to the end of the video here, and I'll include some links in the show more section of the video so that you can get some information about what's going on here. So, thanks for watching.